Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Sharon and this is a channel that is dedicated to all things related to narcissism. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on all types of topics related to narcissism. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, especially today, because I'm just a few subscribers away from 7,000. So maybe you could be number 7,000. In today's video, I'm going to talk about something I haven't spoken about in a bit. Now, I know Joe and I did a video on this probably, geez, you guys, over a year ago. So I don't know if I've ever done one on my own, but that's talking about PTSD and CPTSD. I've had a few PTSD issues this week, and it kind of made me realize I bet that's pretty common, especially around this time of year with the holidays where you're thinking about so many things or you're dreading seeing somebody. So we're going to talk about that today. What is the difference between PTSD and CPTSD? Do you have it? If you do, what does that mean? Can this go away, or do you permanently have this? The other issue is I want to tell you some common symptoms, not issue, but the other thing I want to do is mention some common symptoms that you may have if you have PTSD or CPTSD. Now, I'm going to mention a few. There's many more. So I'm thinking about actually doing a second video on this next week. So whatever ones I missed that you think are important, please put them down in the comments. So what I want to talk about first is the difference between PTSD and CPTSD. So we're talking about post-traumatic stress disorder or complex post-traumatic stress disorder. My understanding of the difference between them is the number of traumatic events you're dealing with. Now, what ends up happening with PTSD is that your body was so used to being in a fight or flight mode that you don't relax the way you need to. Even when you're outside of the event, when it's not happening anymore, there are times when you feel as if you are right back there. So PTSD, that is connected to a singular event. Like I have PTSD, even though there are multiple issues around my ex that caused me pain and trauma connected to PTSD, he is at the center. The pain orbits around him. Joe, on the other hand, has CPTSD. So he has all the same symptoms of PTSD, but we're talking about multiple events. So it isn't just his ex. It's her, it is childhood trauma and a few other things. So all these things, he has the same symptoms. He has PTSD symptoms for every one, but there's multiple of them. So these symptoms I'm going to talk about, they're for PTSD and CPTSD. So the first one I'm going to talk about, and this is one that I've been dealing with lately, is intrusive thoughts. Now this is one of the worst ones for me because I will have these thoughts randomly come in my mind and they just come in like all of a sudden. And it gets worse and worse and worse unless I take immediate action. And this will happen. I'll be doing whatever and I won't be thinking about anything and it'll just hit me across the face. Last night, speaking of that, I'll tell you too, Joe has this issue as well with intrusive thoughts. Every night you will find Joe and I watching either Netflix or YouTube until he is exhausted because he needs to clear his mind. I mean, that's PTSD right there. He has to clear his mind. I don't generally have that problem. I am not a great sleeper, so I'll wake up in the middle of the night. Almost every night I'm up at like 2 a.m. So by the time it's 11:30, 11, I'm exhausted. So usually half the time we are watching YouTube or Netflix, but I'm really sleeping on Joe's chest. But what happened last night is he was tired, and so we went to go to bed. He was wrapped around me. I could hear him breathing right in my ear, and I could tell he was falling asleep. I was having a very, very different reaction. I started thinking about my house in New Hampshire. Now, this has been happening to me for the last few days. It's very, very intrusive. So it started 2 days ago. Joe and I were watching a movie. We're actually, we were watching? We were watching that cartoon movie, Rudolph, with like the elf that wants to be a dentist and the abominable snowman. Started watching that, and all of a sudden, it just I wasn't even thinking about this. It just pops in my mind that in my house, New Hampshire, in the attic, in a blue bin, are a Clarice and Rudolph stuffed animal that my kids and I got at Build-A-Bear. And I wanted those stuffed animals, and I was very upset about not having them. I had a similar experience a few weeks ago where I started thinking about my son's Thomas trains, and all of a sudden I have to have them, and I feel sick over not having them. And it doesn't matter what somebody says, because so many people were so helpful to me. Joe's telling me, it's all right, Sharon, it's okay. It's just a toy. It's all right. It doesn't matter, you're safe. And he's right. For those of you that don't know, my kids and I, we lost our house. We had to flee the house about a year ago for our own safety. We took what we could, but we left things. And it's so painful when I think about that, because I feel like I let my kids down too. And then, if I don't do something, it gets worse. Next thing you know, and this happened last night, I'm suddenly thinking about my animals that have passed away that are buried in the yard in New Hampshire. And I know, I get it, it sounds weird, but I feel like I betrayed them, because I had them buried around my window. The master bedroom was on the first floor. They had a lot of windows, and I had it right. I had them, they're buried there. And it was, the reason I did that was because you're still with mommy. Mommy's right here. You're right next to mommy. And then last night I'm laying there 1,000 miles away thinking mommy's not there. Mommy left. Mommy abandoned you. And I know that didn't happen, right? With every single thing, I know. And Joe talks to me, it comforts me. But when these intrusive thoughts come over you, they can be paralyzing. Now, what has happened, what Joe and I have found really helps with that is changing whatever you're doing. Do not, under any circumstances, keep going down that rabbit hole, because the thing is, it doesn't stop. It gets worse and worse and worse until now you don't have the ability. You can't control it. Now it has to wash over you, and you're going to be in a terrible mood for hours, days. That's what happens. Always try to stay one step ahead. It's exhausting. But, I ended up last night. No, I didn't want to get up. Joe was wrapped around me. I wanted to stay there. But I ended up getting up, and I told Joe, I'm so sorry. I have to sleep on the couch, because I needed to put something on. I couldn't be in silence. I couldn't just lay there with these thoughts going through my brain over and over and over. And the next thing you know, God knows what I haven't remembered that's at that house that is going to hit me. It's traumatic, you guys. So intrusive thoughts, if this happens to you, it is a sign of PTSD. Now, I want to talk a little bit about fear. Fear is another symptom of PTSD. Now, of course, it's also CPTSD, just for convenience, since we know that CPTSD is multiple events. So we're talking about fear. Now, when you have been abused, and you can have PTSD in many ways. Traditionally people think of war veterans, and absolutely war veterans have PTSD. So do people that have suffered in abusive relationships, or who have lost family members, or people who had fire, you were raped. All these are traumatic events that can give you PTSD, and when you're going through the moment, you're feeling it so strongly. It's like you're still there. So when I think about things, when I think about how badly I wanted those Thomas trains a few weeks ago, I felt like I could almost touch them if I just, and then you start thinking crazy thoughts. Maybe I could go to the house and get them, and of course I would never do that. That would be the worst thing I could do. But you think these thoughts, right? You're feeling fear. You're feeling it now. So even though the event happened a while ago, you're feeling the fear right now. If you live here, nobody wants to wake Joe up. Joe is not, it's my job. I am the designated Joe waker-upperer. The reason for this is because of his PTSD. He is always feeling the stress going through his body, even when he's sleeping. When I wake Joe up, this is typically what happens. I'll have to go. I have to go. That made it sound horrible. So I sit in the bed, and I touch his arm gently, and I'll be like, hey, Joe, and then, if he doesn't stir, because he's a very deep sleeper, I'll kind of gently scratch his arm. Hey, Joe. When he wakes up, it's what's wrong? Every single time. So immediately it's okay, it's all right. It's 6:30. You told me you wanted me to wake you up. It's okay, it's all right. He's okay, but he has to remember where he is. Just like when I'm having these intrusive thoughts and I feel I'm there, I could reach out and grab those Thomas trains, grab the toys that I want. I'm not. I have to remind myself, okay, I'm here. I'm here with Joe. I'm safe. So it's almost like you have to tell yourself. So that happens with fear, and it also happens with intrusive thoughts. Now, the third one I'm going to talk about is hypervigilance. Now, again, with hypervigilance, it's kind of like you are ready to react at all times. You shouldn't be ready to react all the time. You should have some downtime. Hypervigilance is something where somebody is always ready to act. You're afraid. It's fight, flight, or freeze. I was hypervigilant for 2 years with my ex. Now, this is what my hypervigilance, I ended up sleeping with a gun next to me. My ex would randomly show up at the house. He broke into the house one time. I was so afraid, my kids too. I was so afraid that he was going to harm us that I'd constantly be on the lookout for him. I would sleep with, literally slept with a loaded gun next to the bed because I was afraid if something happened. It made me feel safer, but I was hyper vigilant. Any word, any noise. And I actually had an alarm system. And this was the thing. So I had this alarm system on the house. And it went off in the middle of the night one time, and it just, there was something wrong with the alarm. It wasn't my ex. I was so traumatized by that. I hear this go up, and I could see it was in the basement. So one of the basement, it said on it, like it told, the way the alarm system was, it told me which window was compromised, and it was a downstairs basement window. It said it was open. So I was terrified. I didn't want to go down the basement. I'm like, oh my God. So I'm thinking, I was so afraid. I eventually went down to the basement, right? And the window was absolutely fine. So it was like malfunctioned. It had like a little tab on the side. It fell off. It was fine. I was so afraid. I never put the alarm on after that because I woke up. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I was so afraid. I'm all alone. And this was the thing too. I was all alone in the house with the kids. And granted, I'm an adult, capable woman, but my ex is 3 times my size. And I know he's dangerous and violent. And the way we live, we had 40 acres of woods behind us. He could have snuck around the side. Nobody would see. Hyper vigilance, where you're always worried about something, you're always looking for something, you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Now, another symptom that there can be is chronic pain. Now, this doesn't happen to me, but it does happen to Joe. So sometimes like his back will really bother him. And if I like rub his shoulders, I can feel there's like these knots of tension. I can feel them. Like they're part of his body now, the tension from the abuse. I can literally feel it. So, I try to rub his back and help him feel better. Sometimes what people have also is they could have, this happened to my daughter one time. She got so afraid that actually her body was shaking. She was convulsing. It went away after a while, but her arm, it kept shaking. It kept shaking for over a day. So that wasn't necessarily painful, but it was like a bodily reaction. Something that has happened to me, and this doesn't really hurt, but if you know what TMJ is, that's really like if you clench, and some people do this in their sleep. They'll like clench their jaws in their sleep. Well, what happens to me is that I must like clench so bad at night that and like the next day, so Joe and I will watch our shows, right, on the laptop. Typically, he'll be holding the laptop, right, and I'll have my head in his chest. If I lay there like that for too long, when I lift my head up, like my jaw doesn't feel right. It's not aligned. And that likely is a symptom of PTSD that you wouldn't even think of. I can feel it, and I get afraid that my jaw is going to be snapped out of place. It doesn't hurt. It just feels weird. But yeah, the chronic pain, TMJ, those are things that people can experience as well. Now, the last one that I want to talk about for today is self-harm. So many people end up hurting themselves when, actually, let me back up for a second. Joe said this one time, and I can feel this. He had said that he used to drink to hurt other people. And I've heard people say stuff like that before. People self-harm because it makes them feel better about pain that has happened to them. So it's kind of like this weird thing. Joe and I were at this, we went to a recovery meeting one time, and there was this woman there. And I could not take my eyes off her because I've never seen somebody, I couldn't believe how bad this was. She had like slice marks, like scars all over her arms. Now, I have to say, like, I don't know. Maybe she was trying to get attention because just realistically, I wouldn't want people to see that. I wouldn't be wearing a tank top and shorts, right? But she did, and she had there were marks all over her legs. I didn't even know it could be this bad. Now, it looked like she had like they were healed. I didn't see anything fresh, but she had definitely had a problem with self-harm. And that is the saddest thing to me, that somebody will hurt themselves because somebody else hurt them. So people might cut, people might bite their nails. I've heard of people that like wind up hair and pull it out of their head. I actually said to my daughter at one time, and she was horrified when I said this, I was like, you know what? I'm like, I think I can actually kind of relate to people who cut. She's like, you would want to be a cutter? I'm like, no, I don't want to be a cutter. I'm saying, because sometimes I've done this. I have gotten several piercings over the last year, and I'm not the last year, the last couple of years. And part of the reason that I do this is because I like the rush of pain. So it's kind of weird, but every once in a while, and then my daughter is becoming this way too, it'll kind of be like, you know what? I think it's time for a piercing, because it's that excitement and the rush, and it's a kind of a lesser degree. It's not really self-harming depending on how you look at it, but yeah, doing something to yourself, causing some type of pain on yourself because somebody else hurt you, that also is a symptom of PTSD. So here are just some of the symptoms of PTSD and, like I said, CPTSD. Tell me, do you have any of these symptoms? Because the reality is, Joe and I believe that I have PTSD and he has CPTSD because we just believe it from things we've read and talking to each other, but it wasn't diagnosed at a doctor. So if this is you, definitely don't be shy about going to a doctor, because a doctor could probably really help you. You might be able to take some antidepressants, or maybe just therapy would be good. I mean, there's so many different things that you can do. Read about PTSD, read about it and see, what can you do? What are some things that you can do when you have the symptoms? Because like I said, thank God I actually got out of bed last night and went over to the couch, because if I had just stayed there, I would have went down such a rabbit hole. God knows what I would have been thinking. Or like if Joe said to me, you know what, let's just not watch a show tonight. We'll just fall asleep. That would be difficult for him, and he'd be more likely to go down that bad rabbit hole. So when something works and you can talk to the people around you who can understand that makes a huge difference. PTSD, CPTSD, it can get better. It will get better. It's one of those things, it flares up every once in a while. I've had a flare up the last few days. I do think it's because the house is going to be for sale soon. I'll talk to you guys about that on Friday. Definitely not today, because the real estate agent really upset me when I spoke to him. So I'll talk to you guys about that. I will mention that on Friday or over the weekend with Joe. One of the two, so you'll be able to keep up with the latest. But CPTSD, PTSD, it's more of what comes with a narcissist, right? I mean, they're just the gift that keeps on giving. I'm at the point, really, even when I have a bad time, though, it's just there's no way. Over my dead body, is my ex going to do one more thing? So I try to focus on the positive. That's something I do every day. Every day, the first thing I do when I wake up is thank God. And I think about what I can accomplish today. I have goals for my family every day. I want to make everybody smile once a day. There's all types of things that I try to do on my own. But also, I really try to stay one step ahead, because that really is what you need to do. Stay one step ahead. You can delay it for an hour, or maybe you were able to cut something off. Like last night, I was able to cut it off. I went out and I fell asleep, and it was all right. Instead of laying there having nightmares and something horrible happening, we are in control of ourselves, right? And for some of us, we grew up with narcissists. That's all we've ever been around. So we have to learn how to function in the free world. I heard somebody say one time that when they left prison, it was a YouTuber actually, she said when she left prison, she was so overwhelmed with all the choices that she had in her life. So many different things she could do, like even just going to CVS and trying to choose which deodorant you wanted. There were so many of them. And I was telling Joe the other day, I'm thinking about doing a video on kind of maybe like culture shock after you leave a narcissistic relationship, because the relationship I have with Joe now is so different. It's night and day, and it's almost like I had to relearn what a relationship is or what to expect. Like, I'll just give you one quick example. When my ex was coming home from work, I would always dread it. So that was my normal, dreading the ex coming around. With Joe, when he's on his way home, I am like jumping up and down. I'm so excited. It's just like a difference. And there's many of those differences. So let me know if you think that could be an interesting video as well. All right, guys, I got to go. I will talk to you all on Friday. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day. And don't forget to subscribe, because I'm so excited to be close to 7,000. Bye, guys. Love you.